Open it up when Sid tells me we're good.
Good.
Oh, so, all right, Sid, thank you. That works. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the May 12th Executive Committee meeting for PlanRVA. This time we'll ask for a roll call and certification form.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Good morning.
You sound great, Gilbert.
Awesome. Good. Finally. All right. Chair Winslow,
Present.
Mr. Atkins, Dr. Newbill,
Here.
Mr. Sharp,
Here.
Mr. Davis, Reverend Nelson, Miss Page, Mr. Byerly,
Here.
and Dr. McGraw.
Here.
And a quorum is present.
Thank you so much. All right. Has anybody had an opportunity, or everybody had an opportunity to read the meeting minutes? And is there any motions to amend or any corrections that need to be noted? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, before a motion,
Sure.
is it okay if I abstain, not being here for the minute for that meeting?
You sure can.
I know Ms. Abbott was in my place, but okay.
Sure can, yeah, no, absolutely.
All right.
You vote like you want, and between you and God on that. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
I've got a motion approved.
Do we need a second?
Yes.
Second.
And a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. All right, we'll now move into an office update from Martha.
Thank you. Well, lots of exciting things happening. I will foreshadow by saying the Finance Committee next meets on May 24th. We'll have a pretty quick turnaround, so Mr. Byerly, just as a heads up, I did a page turn yesterday with the office space plans with the architecture and project managers and everything. Mechanical engineering is underway as well, so they'll be completing the total set of the construction documents over the next week. I'm hoping to be able to distribute an electronic version of the plans to all of the members of the committee late next week and be able to give you guys some time to look things over. It may be that there are still some grammatical and other things that still need to be kind of finalized, but we want to be able to get you guys the set of the plans as soon as possible.
There we go.
We're at the stage right now where we're kind of finalizing door handles and those kinds of things. So all of that's getting incorporated in. I guess the big high level thing is that we're continuing to stay within the budget. So we have a budget for this project that is essentially the tenant improvements that are being provided, plus the 6 months of the rent abatement, plus a $250,000 contribution from the commission. So that is the sum total of the budget. We'll be reviewing that with the Finance Committee on the 24th. We've had to make some adjustments to the line items in the budget as we've gone along, as costs have come in, but we're committing to kind of holding the total budget line where it was approved. We've also incorporated, from a strategy perspective, some add alts to the construction documents to be able to see where pricing comes in on things. So yesterday I learned, for example, that we had originally planned to go with the hollow metal framing for the doorway entrances and the accompanying window panels that are next to those. It turns out that right now aluminum is coming in at a better price than the hollow metal. So we're adding that as an add alt just to be able to kind of make sure that we're taking advantage of material pricing and whatnot. So those kinds of things are kind of where we are. Later this afternoon, we're going to be meeting with a local artist to talk about what options we might have to be able to have some of our larger wall space, decorated with local art and some things like that. And staff have been meeting with our furniture team at Creative to be able to talk through what the workstations are going to look like and how those should be appointed with the different desk options and everything like that. So things are progressing quite well, I would say. We've got a team that includes, just so that you get a feel, put everybody's name down, Sid, and Dan Mata, Janice Firestone, Lee Bedford, Chet Parsons, Ken Lance, Diane Fusco, and Gilbreth. So Lee and Gilbreth have been working pretty intensely right now on doing an inventory of everything on our ownership, evaluating what's going to be able to be moved. So all the people that are in enclosed offices are going to keep furniture from here. All the staff that are in open offices will get the new furniture. And then we're doing kind of a mix in the meeting and conference rooms of taking a lot of the stuff that we have with us. I'm hopeful that budget will still allow us to be able to put new furniture in the boardroom, so we can really use that as a flex space. The measure that we'll take if budget doesn't allow is we will take this furniture and then plan for a future year to be able to do a swap out with kind of more flexible furniture and that kind of thing, but we'll keep the committee posted on that. So, questions?
Anybody have any questions? Have there been any major cost increases as we've gone through so far?
The design and the electrical and engineering was over budget. Scale relatively in the whole of the budget. I can't say that was like a big thing, but when you have, it's a relatively small budget line item and then it's double what you planned, that kind of a thing. So, but I think proportionally it's going to be okay. We had a contingency and incorporated into the budget, and we're holding the line.
Cheaper than what we had budgeted?
No, I will say, the one glimmer of hope is I did hear that some projects that are happening right now are actually coming in from bidding at budget. So, nobody's having anything come in under budget, but it's nice to hear that at least budgeting is seeming to kind of normal out a little bit. So I'm going to remain maybe naively, but optimistic that our budget is sound, and we're just prepared to make choices as we need to go along.
Anybody else have any comments?
I will also note, this is a topic that the committee is going to need to take up in the next month or two, but we also have been talking about kind of the timeline. We're still in that phase where we don't know, especially until we get the contractor under agreement, what that build out timeline is. But as you all remember, our move out date here is October 31. We do have the basis of kind of that point of comparison of the move out of the space, go to either a temporary location for meetings, that kind of thing, for whatever period of time, if we need to have that, or the comparison to the holdover here. So that'll be also coming to the committee in the next couple of weeks to be able to review those options. So we've got a couple of really good options to be able to hold meetings in kind of an interim basis. So there are spots that you're probably familiar with, but I think I've been scoping those out, so I'll be able to give those options to the committee.
All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
Could I suggest that we revisit item number 2 now that Ms. Page is present, and review of that vote, please?
All right, so we've got a quorum item issue on our vote for minute passage. Can I get another motion to approve this movement?
So moved.
Thank you. And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention?
Aye.
Very good. All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, now we get to Cvta staffing.
So this item is an action item for the committee this morning, if you're so inclined. Really, it's just an administrative mechanism for us to be able to accommodate the new Cvta executive director. We've added that bottom level in the enclosure for you to be able to accommodate the salary range for the advertised position. I know, Mrs. Page, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you are on the recruitment committee for that.
I'm gonna tell you, I can't even hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The pay and salary classification document in the packet is for your review today. The only change to that is the very bottom line on the document to be able to accommodate the new Cvta executive director.
I see.
I've just added that additional level, if you will, to be able to accommodate the salary range that's been advertised. So that's the only change. And as far as a status, Mrs. Page is a co-chair of that recruitment committee. So the recruitment process is underway. We're doing this intentionally before anyone is hired, or, it's totally separate from the negotiation process, just so that we have that as part of our pay and classification system.
So please, Ms. Page.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you that we are meeting on Monday. The plan is Monday to do, we've divided into 3 tiers. And so we will be interviewing tier 5, all 5, tier 1 with 5 candidates. We'll do it virtual on Monday. And then we'll decide and narrow that group down. And it's Mrs. Spoonhauer, myself, and the HR roundtable that'll be doing the interviews. And then we'll come back and bring them in person, because we have applicants from out of state, like Florida and Ohio, as well as Virginia. And so instead of just bringing them in that trip, we're gonna do 2 groups of interviews. So the first group will be on Monday, and it'll be virtual. And Mr. Spoonhauer will update Cvta. Once that group is narrowed down, then we'll make a decision and bring the recommendation to Cvta to decide who they want, decide if that's the recommendation that they want to go with, I'll put it like that. And so that's where we are now. They did advertise, I don't think we advertised the salary. I think we advertised the salary range.
Yes.
And so all of that will be decided, and I guess that'll go before the finance committee to decide that.
And that range, I presume, was sort of.
$15 an hour to $20 an hour.
Okay. But it was based on
It's based on, we did ask the roundtable to go out when they were trying to put together, job descriptions and all that. Also, we're trying to put together salary ranges. So we have a salary range as well. So we have a number up in there.
Gotcha, okay. Any questions that spur any questions or comments?
Please, no.
All right, fair enough. You have anything else on that one?
No, so if the committee is willing, the action requested would be to approve the additional classification.
All right, is there a motion on the floor to do that?
I move to approve the additional classification to support CVT.
I have a motion. Second. In a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Very good.
Yep. Okay, the budget is on the agenda for the full commission meeting. I thought rather than having you sit through 2 presentations of the budget, I would hit kind of the high levels of some of the objectives as a follow-up from our executive committee conversation last month. Just to give you a little bit of grounding, the FY 2023 budget was reviewed by the Audit, Facilities, and Finance Committee at their last meeting and is recommended this morning for approval by the full commission. We were able to achieve a balanced budget, so it is a 0 revenues and expenses match budget for the upcoming fiscal year that does incorporate the funding for the award of increases for staff that we talked about last month. That does include a 5.9% salary increase pool. That's the 5.9 is based on the published figures for the cost of living that were reported back in January. And it also, the 5.9% increase pool would be available to all employees who have completed their probationary period. So just to be able to.
What's the probationary?
It's a 6-month probationary period, yeah. So, so we've been able to factor in that kind of prorated when those awards would come in. We also incorporated a separate pool for one-time salary adjustments, commonly called bonuses, that would be held back essentially to be awarded mid-fiscal year if the budget is holding for the first 2 quarters. So this helps us to be able to keep our positions, I think, in a competitive place for the market, but also to be able to reward staff members who have been achieving above and beyond. I think that this is in keeping with the conversations that we've had over the last couple of months with our goals on recruitment and particularly retention. But also I will talk through at a later point in the agenda some of the other things that we've incorporated into our programming for next fiscal year to make sure that we're not just thinking about employee retention from a financial compensation perspective, but what are the other things we're doing to make sure that staff know that they're valued and that we appreciate the work that they're doing here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I did want to also just mention to this committee that Mr. Dornick, I think, did a really nice job in the presentation to the Finance Committee, talking through the way that we've been able to restructure the presentation of the budget for the board this morning. So he'll have those highlights again in the full commission meeting. But it really does, I think, give a much clearer picture of how the revenues flow and the expenses come out. There's also so there's sort of three parts of the budget. There's an overview that just gives kind of the top line. Then there's the detailed budget, and then there's a line of business budget. They all feed to one another, but I think it really helps to be able to give much more clarity, again, to how the revenues and expenses flow together, but also how each one of our lines of businesses, if you will, receive revenue, what's subsidized, if you will, where the matching dollars come in to be able to leverage the federal dollars, that kind of thing, which has always been, I think a tricky thing. So I just wanted to say, commendations to him for the work that he's done to be able to put that together. I think, Mr. Byerly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the feedback from the Finance Committee, I think, was very good about format and just being able to kind of see that a little bit more clearly. So that will be on the agenda for this morning. Finance Committee is recommending approval. I know that we talked more distinctly in the Executive Committee about the personnel components of the budget. So if the committee wants to make a recommendation, I provided for that in the budget, or in the agenda, but it's certainly not necessary depending on what your pleasure is.
Well, I really like this line of business line item here. I think this is great.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool from both a board member perspective to be able to more clearly see how the dollars come through, but from a management perspective, it's also really great because it shows us where our opportunities are to go and seek out additional sources of revenue. So as you know, the local member dues are really our most flexible funding. And so we use those strategically to leverage the federal and state grant opportunities that we have. But if we can bring additional funding in to support those lines of business where we're using a lot more than member dues, that helps us to be able to do, I think, more direct local technical assistance and to be able to sort of turn your local member dues back into services direct to the jurisdictions as opposed to eating it up in the match dollars. So
and that's to your point, a direct benefit to our member jurisdictions.
Yeah.
That is being provided by the organization that all of us can go back and talk to our colleagues on our boards about. And I think that's a positive thing. And it shows you, frankly, where grant opportunities there may be either gaps or opportunities to improve those too, which I really like the way this is laid out.
great. Good.
So if anybody had any comments.
It's a lot of numbers,
And
kind of
so-
an eye chart, but yeah.
So, I have a question, with the $20,000 merit, is it a certain amount that you wanna give a certain amount of people, or, I mean, and I'm gonna tell you why I'm asking this question, because if we're gonna do it on merit, are we doing it based on an evaluation? And is it out of the 20,000, is like, we're gonna give so many people this amount, or how are we thinking about doing this?
Sure, yeah.
Because we don't wanna mess with, when we talk about doing all of this to keep morale and everything up, we don't wanna mess with morale by saying, well, this person, they got $5,000 bonus, or this person, they only got $2,500 bonus. How do you determine that? how is this gonna work?
Yeah, it's gonna be based on the performance evaluations and recommendations from the supervisors. So, we do performance evaluations twice a year. One, we have an annual performance evaluation, and in the 6-month mark, we do kind of more like a stay interview, I would call it, how are things going? We are in the midst of launching a new performance management system through our HR platform, Bamboo HR. And that's gonna enable us to have a more kind of dynamic system to be able to track the goals that the employee and their supervisor set and where they are in meeting those progress marks. So that will be the basis for the evaluation for the eligibility for the performance goals. I've set up a structure where we have the ability to award, I don't wanna say a set number at a set number, but I had to have some methodology to
Absolutely.
get the math. So I tried to come up with, okay, if we were gonna give this many at the equivalent of, this amount, this would be what the dollar amount is, and so on. So we have kind of a set of parameters, if you will, that supervisors will have to be able to make a recommendation for each of their employees about what should be awarded.
Just on a question. Yeah.
When is the bamboo system live, is that?
So we went live in December.
Okay.
For the HR platform. So now employees actually have total access to their personnel file. It's all digital. We were able to get everything digitized. We do all of our new employee onboarding, and all of our applications are now through this platform. So we've been able to automate that whole system, which has been so exciting. Diane has led the entire process for that. And then this month, we're doing a training with our staff. We did a supervisor's training a couple weeks ago. And then at the end of the month, we're doing a training with our entire staff on the performance measurement side of things.
Okay.
And so that'll kick off in conjunction with our annual performance review
So
process.
that module, if you will, of the program is.
That's the new piece.
Yeah, the new piece.
Yeah. Yeah. So this really fulfills one of the directives that the executive committee gave to me some time ago to work to find some mechanism to be able to create an employee intranet. You guys might remember that. That was part of the feedback that we had gotten from some of the interviews with staff, and they just felt like they didn't have handy access to information. So this platform has really been a great tool for us to be able to fulfill that. So we can now, we have open enrollment happening right now for employees. Rather than pushing things back out by email, it's on the HR platform. They know exactly where their forms are. Yeah. So, it's been great efficiency and automation, but it's also much, much easier for staff to be able to find the paperwork that they need to fill out to do what they need to do. So. Everybody seems to really like it, so.
Comments, questions on that?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Please.
How many supervisors do this performance evaluation when you're doing that? Is it a supervisor in that department, or is there multiple supervisors who
So
participate?
we have, if I understand your question correctly, we have one supervisor. We do not have staff that have multiple supervisors. So each employee has only one supervisor. The new performance measurement tool will enable us to be able to do more of like a 360 evaluation. So the supervisor and the employee will work together to identify who else, either on their team or across functional teams, should contribute. So I would say at this point in time, that's not necessarily a factor in the performance evaluation. It's more part of just being able to create a stronger feedback loop. But there will be an opportunity to be able to invite peer-to-peer kind of feedback for staff members. So the way that the system works is the employee does a self-evaluation. They answer a series of questions about how they would evaluate their own performance. The supervisor completes a similar thing. It's a blind process, so both are completing those two at the same time. And then there's a share button that happens. And so then the employee and their supervisor have a chance to go through that. And during that, prior to the share portion, they are able to invite other people to participate in the review process with them. Our system is closed, unfortunately. It doesn't have the ability for us to invite external parties to that. So we're gonna do that part analog I guess would be the right way to say that, but there are certain employees who certainly who will benefit from having external parties review. Katie Moody, who leads our emergency management program, for the whole time she's been here, we've incorporated the input of the chair and the vice chair from the Emergency Management Alliance. Mr. Parsons, oftentimes we get input from the chair of the TPO, that kind of thing. So that kind of external invitation will be also part of it.
So it's open for a lot of participation, it sounds like. But the person that makes the decision on whether they qualify for that merit increase.
It's like, how many supervisors are there? How
Right.
many supervisors do we have on staff?
There are 8.
8. There you go.
So, but one supervisor is deciding if this person gets the merit bonus.
They're recommending. I have to normalize to make
Okay.
sure that we don't have a situation where
Yep,
one
That's where I'm
supervisor
going.
is kind of a
Yep.
harsher or friendlier
Right.
grader, if you will.
to keep it fair and
Yes,
equal.
yeah.
Okay,
It's a good point you raised, because somebody could be Mr. Christmas and
right,
come out.
exactly, yeah, and go right along with it, and then there's much more influence there.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a recommendation.
Other comments, questions? Do we want a motion to recommend approval of the budget, or do you want to hold that? What's the pleasure of this body? Required one way or the other, as far as
We have a motion to recommend approval
Yes.
from the committee? I'll make that motion.
My intention was really to, if there were concerns from the executive committee, particularly about the salary and the compensation piece, to be able to give space for that. Certainly, I would love to have the recommendation from the executive committee if the committee is in favor of that, because I just think it strengthens the presentation of the whole commission.
I'll make that motion.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on that item? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. Next item.
Thank you. This is the time of year when the executive committee undertakes the executive director performance evaluation. Our bylaws in Article 7, Section 2C state the executive committee shall be responsible for the annual performance and salary evaluation of the commission's executive director. That is the guidance that you get. You have some past chairs on the executive committee who can share. We've been through, I think Dr. Newbill, when she was chair, went through a pretty year-long process, if I recall, to negotiate what a tool should be, and to deliver that evaluation. Reverend Nelson and Mr. Spoonhour each chair has taken this a little bit their own way. So it's my job to remind you that this is the time of year to do it, and you are welcome to give me instructions on how you'd like to do it. Just for example, there have been instances in the past where I've been instructed to incorporate a closed session on a future executive committee meeting where you have time to be able to discuss. I think that there's also been instances where there's been information circulated prior to that discussion to prepare executive committee members, the tool, a survey, whatnot. So today is really just a discussion and exploration of how you'd like to handle that process this year. Mr. Gregory probably actually has more insight on some of the process than I do, but
That's about it.
so it's your exercise to oversee.
Does anybody have recommendations on how they'd like to see this move forward? I mean, I think, in the past, we've sort of asked, at least in positions like this, we've had people review themselves and sort of tell us how they think they're doing, and then there's this sort of reflective portion from our end as well on how we think the organization is doing and how productive we think it's been and what accomplishments we've had, and then how have those things been done from a process standpoint. Are things running correctly? Are there areas for improvement? And then sort of have that evaluative discussion. I do think the closed session is appropriate for those types of discussions. And so I think, at least from my perspective, Martha, and please feel free to chime in, but I do think that's appropriate to have for, it's not going to be June, right? It'll be in July or August type of meeting, I suspect, right?
Really, I mean,
I don't know if we're going to do this, but don't we have,
this process has ranged each year and how long. It's really, I think, been dependent on members' schedules.
and Sean's about to take over. I know he's excited about that. And so, but I feel like this is sort of a baton that's going to get passed to him and probably should be wrapped up, at least in my view, by the end of August meeting, somewhere in that time frame, to the extent we even meet in some of these months, which I think sometimes we don't. So,
So I
please.
knew you want me to say something.
Please, I did, actually. I'm
Okay,
sitting here thinking,
so-
when's Miss Page going to
so-
talk?
I'm of this opinion,
Sure,
because it's an evaluation.
it is.
It's a great possibility of a salary increase. I don't know if there's salaries in that budget, but I would think that we would do an evaluation, so not necessarily this year, but we would start doing our evaluations so that when it's time for us to approve the budget, that amount is in the budget. Because if not, we're gonna have to come back and amend the budget to put an increase in the budget.
Sure.
Or am I right? Yeah. So if we could sort of start our calendar so that it's done by budget time, then all of that would be included in the budget.
So I think.
I mean, just going forward, something to think about.
To the extent that our budget cycle, I think is,
I mean, we can let Supervisor Davis figure it out, you know what I'm saying?
that's gonna be a lot of it, but I do think we're lined up pretty well with what you're talking about, because we'll certainly have it done by the end of,
I mean, I'm just saying.
yeah, okay.
Does the budget not already anticipate salary increases?
I think to some degree it
Um,
does.
Those of you that have worked with me for a while know that this is a topic that's very uncomfortable for me, but I was instructed last year that for budget purposes, we should incorporate for the executive director the same that is incorporated for the rest of staff. So the 5.9% increase is there as a placeholder with the understanding that that cannot be implemented until the executive committee acts. So just
So
from
the
a
budget anticipates 5.9%.
yes, it does. So
We
it,
could go,
There's no reason we go over that, is there?
there's if we, potentially in discussion, you could go over, you could go under, you could land on top of that, but it's a fairly conservative position from a monetary standpoint.
Because the 5.9 is the cost of living, right?
It's cold.
the instructions that I was given last year was that going forward, I
You're gonna
should,
need 9% cost of living.
Say again?
You're gonna need 9% if you wanna.
Oh, right.
Do the cost of
True,
living.
True cost.
And climbing. So,
You're not wrong.
Okay.
So I think that's a good discussion to have in the context of probably that closed session as well.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Gregory, I'll ask you to help set all that up. I'm sorry, Dr. Newbill.
So let me be clear, there is nothing above and beyond what we are expecting to provide to all staff at 5.9 for Martha's position.
that's correct. I didn't think it was my place
Okay.
to presume
just wanted to
anything
be
other than
clear.
what had been
Like,
discussed in the
generally right
last year, so.
Right, unless
yeah.
we'll go back and make changes.
Which, I don't want to presume anything in the discussion, so.
Mr. Chairman, would you
Please,
like
Mr. Gregory.
a closed session to be on this topic to be scheduled for the next executive committee meeting?
I think that's appropriate. And then, I will work with you to map out what we'll need for that meeting to take place. Not only from her own evaluation of herself, but also member input. Just timelining that out correctly so that we can have a fruitful discussion at that time.
That sounds fine. I believe the tool that was originally developed by Dr. Newbill and the executive committee a couple of years ago, I believe that's been developed over the past several cycles, right? Do we still have that available to us, or is that, what state is that in?
The tool still exists. It was used the one time and then not used again. But what I have done in the past is provided the chair the full background of all of the documentation that I have received. So
Plan on
It
doing
would be
that.
helpful to get a copy of that, review it, and then sort of see if that's still appropriate. There may be some tweaks that people want to make, but I think that's a good starting place.
I can also channel through you if you like the bamboo system thing. I don't know whether
wanna
it's.
get into the intranet stuff, but maybe send that to the chairman and myself and we'll take it from there.
That's a good starting place.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you. And personnel priorities.
Yeah, so I just wanted to share with you a couple of things upcoming. Typically in the June meeting, we really talk about work program, but because the full commission isn't meeting in June, I wanted to kind of get ahead of the game a little bit here. We've already talked about bamboo quite a bit, so I'll skip over that. But we are also looking to implement a stronger employee engagement program, as I mentioned. Gilbreth has been leading this effort to put together a more formalized program for employee recognitions, whether that be we've had a lot of celebrations this year with employees getting outside acknowledgements and awards, but also to be able to recognize staff for their anniversaries and internal kind of accomplishments. And we've also been putting together a more structured training program for staff. So many of our staff members are actively, well, during COVID, it was a little bit harder, but generally speaking, they're pretty active in pursuing their own kind of professional credentialing or training that they need to do for their jobs, but we're putting together a more structured program to bring staff together and learn things. So later this month, we're going to kick off a training program through the Chesterfield Learning Center on Office 365 and how we can more fully leverage the tools in that. And there's also a component of that training that is going to seek to define and then improve our internal and external communication strategies. One of the things that we've identified as an office is that we email a lot. And so how do we think about that, and is email the best way to communicate in all circumstances or in that kind of thing? So we're going to be talking that through. We've also had Rashonda Linear-Jackson and Gilbreth have been working to weave in some of our priorities from our community engagement strategy. So goal 4 is really about educating the staff on what it means to be equitable in the way that we approach our community engagement activities and how we think about inclusion. So we are working this year to be able to get out into our local jurisdictions more and really understand the communities that you all represent so that we're not inadvertently sort of defaulting to the communities and neighborhoods that we know because that's where we live or that's the places and spaces that we travel. So we've been working on that. So far, some of the programs on that front have been very well received by staff. They've really enjoyed it. And it's been a nice way to be able to kind of broach the subject of staff getting to know each other since we've had new people come on and that kind of thing. But what kind of more to come on that? And we'll be particularly reaching out to members of the executive committee and others on the commission to hear more about how we can get to know your districts or particular community groups that we might not normally interact with that we should know as an agency. And then finally, kind of circling back to the office space, the new office space does really represent for us an opportunity to kind of, I think, reset culture. So we're going to be working with staff in addition to all the planning for just with the moving and the logistics of that. We're going to be spending quite a bit of time with staff talking about what expectations are, how we think about from a communication and workflow and all of those kinds of things. So that team that I mentioned earlier, Sid and Dan and Janice and Lee and Chet and Ken and Diane and Gilbreth have all been kind of critical to talking about how we want to show up in that new space essentially and what that should look like. So I think everybody's growing excitement about that. We're on that wave of uncertainty and now I think things are starting to crystallize a little bit more and I would say it's an exciting time for us. So those are a couple of things that are on my radar screen for sort of personnel related topics. The executive committee does serve as the personnel committee. So I always want to try to keep you guys at least once a year up to date on what we're trying to do specifically in that space. And certainly if you have suggestions or things that you are seeing in your jurisdictions that you think that we should contemplate, would love to get that feedback.
Any comments, questions?
Just a quick question.
Please.
Sure. The training you're talking about seems pretty substantive across many areas. So I was just wondering, and maybe it would be of no value to some staff, but continuing education units, opportunity for that. I'm not sure if it's helpful for folks, but it might be. We have a lot of academic institutions online and brick and mortar that might be an opportunity.
It's interesting. I think last fall we talked a little bit about, I think Mr. Davis actually asked that we look comprehensively at our benefits, and we do provide I was gonna say sponsorship, that's not quite the right word. We do provide for staff to attend different training opportunities, but I don't think that we really explicitly encourage educational progression, if you will. And so that could be something that we could look at in this coming year as sort of a more explicit, take advantage of either the modular courses that are available around the region or other opportunities. Because you're right, there are those kinds of programs, and I haven't seen very many of our staff members request to sign up, and so that could be because we're not doing enough to promote them.
It's a good point.
I'll make a note about that.
Dr. Newbill, we in Chesterfield have career enhancement opportunities that align with some of those educational attainments where you can actually increase your salary because you're increasing your skill sets to the organization value. So I think it can be a very powerful tool, not only for developing the individual, but also the organization. So I don't know, so maybe something to look at. When you go, I know you've got a leadership role in the Southeastern conference of your group, and so when you go to those conferences and things like that, do you usually take staff with you, or are they invited, or how does all that work?
Yeah, so the Southeastern Regional Directors Institute, I do not typically, because it's for executive directors. But we are actually starting. Our conference is next week, and we're going to have a work session on the creation of a track for assistant and deputy executive directors. Succession planning is a big discussion in my field right now, and the reality of the fact that the last 10 years have been pretty hard on the industry, with people retiring and really nobody poised to assume the next opportunity. And we have had what we call fly-ins, where we've had a specific topic where we have invited staff that are engaged in finance or public engagement or kind of topical based things. And so we'll create a space for staff members to be able to participate in things like that. The National Association of Development Organizations is a conference that is more suited to be able to invite more staff. And we've been talking about that this year. It's going to be in Pittsburgh. I know Dr. Newbill attended in Charlotte a couple years ago, but it'll be in Pittsburgh this coming cycle, if I'm not mistaken. So that felt like that was a good one to maybe introduce. It's a little bit easier than when it's in like Reno or something.
Not as fun.
Yeah, I don't know. Reno's my favorite place, but so we've been looking at that. And then, I mean, Chet and Sulab, for example, are attending a conference next week where they're going to be actually presenters at the conference on the work that we're doing with scenario planning. So several of our staff members attend the Virginia chapter of the American Planning Association conference every year. We have the State Association conference that staff members are invited to. So we do have quite a bit of opportunities like that. But I think it might be worthwhile to sort of talk to staff about their interest in more traditional education opportunities as opposed to the kind of professional credentialing. So we could look into that. I'm sorry, yeah, do you want to add to it?
Sorry, just to jump in, we're also encouraging staff to pursue professional certification. With COVID, it's been a challenge to get all that organized, but we're hoping that over this year, there are a number of staff that are interested in sitting for the test, and that would obviously move them along their career advancement paths.
I will also say that, and this is, I think, a philosophical alignment that Chet and I have. I think it's important for you to know, we do strongly encourage staff members to go to conferences and things like that, but we encourage them to go with the intention of getting involved and not just going to be able to go someplace cool. So a number of our staff members are working to either assume or position themselves to someday assume like a leadership role in the organization. And so we do strongly encourage that, so that it's not just it's important to us that our staff members actually get involved and don't just kind of reap the kind of peripheral benefits of these kinds of things.
I like conferences sometimes, but anyway, but even for me, I've gotten a ton of webinars over the last couple of years. I mean, and so when I think about continuing education, I mean, with all of the different clients that we have, even when we talk about emergency management, all that, it's a ton of continuing education that they can be certified for and be in place to do it. I mean, that type of continuing education. I mean, we go to a conference and they might go to this one and they might go to this session and they might go to that session. But if I'm thinking about certification and verify and certify, those type of things, especially with the different clients that they're dealing with. So in their field, then they become experts. So when you have a question, just like me, I go to the expert, I don't know, And so that's how I feel about it.
So I will mention, as Chet said, that we have a handful of staff that are interested in pursuing their AICP credential. That comes with a requirement to do continuing ed. You have to get a certain number of hours of continuing education each year to maintain it. So I'm trying to think, we probably have 6 AICPs on staff right now. And then I think we have another 3 that are pursuing that. Katie just got her professional emergency management certificate. And so that will also require that kind of thing. So I hear you. And I think that that's a commitment that our staff members have to building that expertise.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, unless there's anything further, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn if you will.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
So